My name is Chloe, and I am 27 years old. I never thought I would be the type of person to completely disappear from my family's life. Yet here I am, standing in my empty apartment, staring at photos of my parents and brother Jackson, enjoying a luxury vacation in Bali. A family vacation I knew nothing about until I saw it on Instagram. So I packed my bags and vanished without a word. Let me tell you what happened when they finally realized I was gone. If you are watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are from, and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey of standing up for myself after a lifetime of being forgotten. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Seattle, with tree-lined streets and perfectly manicured lawns. Our family home was a spacious colonial with 5 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and a view of Lake Washington. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My parents, Diana and Thomas, founded and ran a successful technology consulting firm that catered to Fortune 500 companies. They were well respected in the business community, often featured in local business magazines, and our home regularly hosted dinner parties for important clients. My early childhood memories are filled with bedtime stories, weekend trips to the zoo, and my mother teaching me to bake chocolate chip cookies. I was their only child for 4 years, and during that time I felt truly loved and cherished. Everything changed when my brother Jackson was born. It started subtly. At first, it made sense that a newborn would require more attention. I tried to be the understanding big sister, helping where I could and not making demands. But as the years passed, what began as necessary attention to an infant evolved into a clear pattern of favoritism that would define my family dynamic for decades to come. By the time I was 10 and Jackson was 6, the difference in how we were treated was unmistakable. The walls of our home told the story clearly. The hallway leading to the living room was like a shrine to Jackson, filled with framed photos of his t-ball games, swimming lessons, and school plays. My school photos were there too, but they were smaller, tucked between his larger frames, almost as an afterthought. My academic certificates and art competition ribbons were kept in a folder in the study drawer, while Jackson's participation trophies for soccer stood proudly on the mantel. Jackson got his athleticism from me, my father would boast to guess, while my mother would add, and his charm is all his own. They never mentioned that I had made the honor roll every semester since 3rd grade, or that my artwork had been selected for a citywide exhibition. The pattern extended to how our achievements were celebrated. When I won first place in the state science fair in 6th grade, my parents attended the ceremony but left immediately after because Jackson had a soccer practice they couldn't miss. When Jackson scored his first goal in a soccer game a month later, they took the entire family out for an expensive dinner and presented him with a new gaming system. My 12th birthday remains particularly vivid in my memory. Mom had promised a special dinner at my favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place downtown. We had just ordered appetizers when Dad got a call. Jackson's soccer coach had scheduled an unexpected evening practice session before an upcoming tournament. Without hesitation, my parents asked the waiter to package our food to go. My birthday dinner was finished in the car as we rushed to drop Jackson at practice. We never went back to finish the celebration. Being the older sibling means being more mature and understanding, Chloe, my mother explained as I fought back tears in the back seat, my birthday tiramisu melting in its takeout container. Jackson needs this practice. His team is counting on him. No one was counting on me, it seemed. Throughout my childhood, I developed mechanisms to cope with being the forgotten child. I became fiercely independent, learning to celebrate my own achievements and find validation within myself. I stopped telling my parents about school events or competitions. Why set myself up for disappointment? The one person who saw through the family dynamic was my Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister. Unlike my mother, Sarah had pursued a creative career as a writer and traveled extensively before settling in Portland. She visited several times a year, and during these visits, I felt truly seen. You remind me so much of myself," Aunt Sarah told me during one visit when I was 13. We were sitting on the back porch swing while my parents were inside fawning over Jackson's report card that showed he had managed to pull his grades up to B's. "Your mom was always the golden child in our family, too. I know exactly how it feels to have your light dimmed by someone else's shine." She made a point to attend my school events when she could, and always remembered to send thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts that reflected my actual interests. Her validation kept me from completely internalizing the message that I wasn't worth attention or celebration. As I progressed through middle school and into high school, I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities. If I couldn't earn my parents' attention through existing, perhaps I could earn it through excellence. I joined the debate team, ran for student council, took advanced placement classes, and volunteered at the local animal shelter. My schedule was packed from morning until evening, partly from genuine interest, but mostly from the desperate hope that something would finally make my parents proud. I was elected student council president in my junior year, made the National Honor Society, and was named a National Merit Scholar. My parents acknowledged these achievements with brief congratulations that always felt perfunctory. Meanwhile, when Jackson made the varsity soccer team as a freshman, my parents hosted a backyard barbecue and invited the entire extended family to celebrate. "Your brother is special," my mother once told me when I finally gathered the courage to ask why my achievements never warranted similar celebrations. "Athletics open doors that academics simply cannot. Besides, these things come naturally to you, Chloe. Jackson has to work harder for his successes." The irony was that I worked incredibly hard while Jackson seemed to coast on natural charm, and my parents' willingness to make excuses for him. When he was caught cheating on a math test, my parents argued with the school administration that he was under too much pressure. When I stayed up until 3 in the morning perfecting a term paper, it was simply expected that I would excel. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, I had learned to swallow my hurt and disappointment. I applied to colleges with minimal input from my parents, researched scholarship opportunities on my own, and planned my future, knowing I would likely be doing it without much family support. The pattern was too deeply established to change, and in some ways accepting that was less painful than continuing to hope for what would never come. The pattern that had defined my childhood only deepened during my high school years. As student council president, I organized school events, led community service initiatives, and maintained a perfect GPA. My guidance counselor called me one of the most promising students she had ever worked with. But at home, these accomplishments might as well have been invisible. "Chloe has always been our responsible one," my mother would tell her friends at social gatherings, as if my achievements were merely a personality trait, rather than the result of hard work and determination. Meanwhile, Jackson's B- average was celebrated as a great improvement, and his position as backup goalkeeper on the soccer team was discussed with the reverence typically reserved for Olympic athletes. The week of my high school graduation brought the contrast into sharp focus. I was valedictorian and had spent weeks perfecting my speech. The night before graduation, I wanted to practice it for my family, but dinner conversation revolved entirely around Jackson's acceptance to State University, with a modest soccer scholarship. "We always knew you would be fine, Chloe," my father said when I finally mentioned my speech. "You have always been self-sufficient. Jackson needs more guidance and celebration to build his confidence." My graduation ceremony should have been a moment of triumph. As I stood at the podium delivering my speech about perseverance and future possibilities, I searched the audience for my family. They were there, but my father was checking his watch, my mother was fixing her makeup, and Jackson was playing a game on his phone. Only Aunt Sarah, who had driven 6 hours to attend, was genuinely watching with tears of pride in her eyes. The real blow came 2 weeks later, when I received my acceptance to Cornell University with a substantial but partial scholarship. I would need additional funding to cover the remaining tuition and living expenses. I approached my parents with detailed research on costs and a proposed plan for how they might help. "Cornell, that is so far away and expensive." My mother frowned. "State University has a perfectly adequate architecture program, and you could live at home to save money. Plus, you would be there with Jackson." When I pushed back, explaining that Cornell's architecture program was among the best in the country, my father sighed heavily. "Chloe, we have to be practical about our resources. Jackson will need support for his college experience, and with both of you in school simultaneously, we need to make some compromises. You have always been academically gifted. Surely you can make the most of any program." They agreed to pay half of what my scholarship did not cover. I would need to work and take out small loans for the rest. Meanwhile, they were already discussing buying Jackson a car for his high school graduation and planning to fully fund his education, including an apartment off campus, so he could focus on athletics and academics without distraction. I arrived at Cornell determined to make the most of my opportunity despite the financial strain. During orientation week, I met Layla, a vivacious engineering student from Chicago, whose warmth and immediate friendship felt like finding water in a desert. We connected instantly over our shared love of design, though she focused on mechanical engineering while I pursued architecture. You mean your parents could afford to fully support you, but chose not to? While they are supporting your brother completely, Layla asked incredulously when I explained my multiple campus jobs. That is not normal, Chloe. That is not okay. It was the first time someone had so directly challenged the family dynamic I had grown to accept. Throughout freshman year, Layla became my strongest advocate, insisting I recognize the inequality for what it was, and helping me understand that I deserved better. She invited me to spend Thanksgiving with her family when going home seemed too emotionally draining, and her parents welcomed me with genuine warmth. My roommate Taylor, a psychology major from Seattle, offered another perspective on my family situation. What you are describing is classic golden child and scapegoat dynamics, she explained one night as we stayed up late talking. It has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with your parents' issues. The healthiest thing you can do is set boundaries and build your own support system. With Taylor's encouragement, I began limiting my communication with my family. I called home once a week rather than daily, declined to come home for some weekends, and started spending holidays with friends when possible. Each time I did go home, the contrast between my life at Cornell and my place in the family became more stark and painful. During my sophomore year, Professor Martinez, my design fundamentals instructor, took a special interest in my work. She recognized what she called my extraordinary spatial reasoning and aesthetic sensibility, and became a mentor offering additional projects and connections to professional architects. Her belief in my talent provided external validation that helped counter years of parental indifference. You have a gift, Chloe, she told me after reviewing my midterm project. But more importantly, you have the work ethic and vision to build something remarkable with that gift. I see greatness in your future. Meanwhile, Jackson was struggling at State University. My parents made frequent trips to visit him, help organize his coursework, and attend his soccer games. During one particularly difficult week for me with 3 major projects due, and a campus job schedule that had me working nearly 30 hours on top of classes, I called home just needing to hear a supportive voice. The call went to voicemail. I later learned my parents were at Jackson's University, helping him prepare for midterms. By junior year, I had created a robust support network at Cornell. My friends became my chosen family, and my relationships with professors and industry connections through internships provided the professional guidance my parents never offered. I worked 3 jobs to cover my expenses: library assistant, campus tour guide, and design tutor. My schedule was grueling, but also filled with genuine connections and growth opportunities. The most heartbreaking moment came during my senior year. My final design showcase was the culmination of 4 years of intensive work. Each architecture student presented their signature project to faculty, industry professionals, and family members. I had created an innovative, sustainable community center design that had already attracted attention from several prominent firms. After months of work, I had sent formal invitations to my parents, included a personal note explaining how important this event was to me, and even offered to help arrange their travel. They had promised to attend, and for once I allowed myself to hope they would witness my achievement. The evening of the showcase arrived. I stood proudly beside my presentation, wearing the new dress I had saved for months to buy. As other students greeted their families and introduced them to professors, I kept glancing at the door. The event was halfway over when I received a text from my mother. Something came up with Jackson. So sorry we cannot make it. Send pictures. I later learned that the emergency was Jackson's girlfriend breaking up with him. My parents had stayed home to console him rather than attend the most important academic event of my college career. Only Aunt Sarah showed up, having flown across the country to support me. As she hugged me tightly after seeing my presentation, she whispered, I am so proud of you, and I am so sorry about your parents. I graduated from Cornell with honors with Aunt Sarah and my chosen family of friends cheering me on. My parents and Jackson attended the ceremony, but left immediately after to catch an early flight home, citing a neighborhood barbecue they did not want to miss. As I watched them leave before I had even taken photos with my friends, something inside me hardened. I was done seeking approval that would never come. It was time to build a life where I was valued. After graduation, I moved to Chicago to start my career at Hartwell and Associates, a prestigious architectural firm known for sustainable urban design. The city welcomed me with its stunning architecture, vibrant neighborhoods, and the promise of anonymity. Here, no one knew me as Jackson's sister or Diana and Thomas's quiet daughter. I could define myself on my own terms. I found a small but charming apartment in Wicker Park with exposed brick walls and large windows that filled the space with natural light. It was the first home that was truly mine, and I decorated it carefully with secondhand furniture. I refinished my self-plants that thrived under my care and artwork from local artists I discovered at neighborhood festivals. Every element reflected my taste and vision, with no need to compromise or accommodate family expectations. Despite the distance, I maintained obligatory contact with my family. I called home once a month, sent appropriate cards and gifts for birthdays and holidays, and made the trip back to Seattle for Christmas each year. These interactions followed a predictable pattern, brief inquiries about my work that never went beyond surface level, followed by extensive updates about Jackson's latest endeavors. Jackson had dropped out of State University during his junior year, deciding that college wasn't the right path for him. Rather than expressing disappointment or encouraging him to finish his degree, my parents fully supported his decision and funded what they called his entrepreneurial journey. This involved a series of short-lived business ideas from a sports coaching app to an organic smoothie delivery service, none of which progressed beyond initial planning stages. Your brother is a visionary, my father explained during one of our phone calls. He is exploring his options. Not everyone is meant for the traditional path you have chosen. The irony that my traditional path had been forced by their limited financial support, while Jackson's vision was fully funded by their generosity, was apparently lost on them. I had learned to swallow such comments, responding with non-committal sounds, rather than pointing out the double standard. At Hartwell and Associates, my hard work and innovative designs quickly caught the attention of senior partners. By my second year, I was assigned to lead projects that architects with twice my experience would have been proud to work on. My dedication came partly from genuine passion for my field, but also from the habit of seeking external validation that I had developed in my family home. If I couldn't be good enough for my parents, perhaps I could be exceptional enough for everyone else. It was during a collaborative project with another firm that I met Alex, a landscape architect, whose warmth and perceptiveness reminded me of Aunt Sarah. We were paired to design an eco-friendly corporate campus, spending long hours discussing how the buildings and grounds could work in harmony. After weeks of collaboration, Alex suggested we grab dinner to celebrate meeting an important deadline. Over pasta and wine at a cozy Italian restaurant, our conversation shifted from professional to personal. I found myself sharing more about my family than I had with anyone since college. Alex listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that helped me articulate feelings I had long suppressed. I notice you minimize your accomplishments when you talk about them, Alex observed. But when you mentioned your parents might visit Chicago and you would show them your latest project, your whole demeanor changed. You seemed smaller somehow. I hadn't realized how transparent my insecurities were, how deeply the patterns of my childhood still affected me. Alex's gentle observation opened a door to self-awareness that I had kept firmly shut. Our friendship deepened over the following months, and Alex became a trusted confidant and weekend exploration partner as we discovered Chicago's hidden gems together. It was Alex who first suggested I might benefit from therapy, noticing how my mood would darken for days after phone calls with my parents. "You deserve to feel valued, Chloe," Alex told me one afternoon as we walked along Lake Michigan after a particularly difficult call with my mother. "And you deserve tools to process what you have experienced." It is not just sad that your parents treat you this way, it is damaging, and you have the right to heal from that damage. With Alex's encouragement, I began seeing Dr. Henderson, a therapist specializing in family dynamics and adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. Our weekly sessions became a lifeline as I began to unpack decades of feeling unworthy and invisible. Despite my growing awareness of the dysfunction in my family relationships, I continued making efforts to maintain connections. I sent thoughtfully chosen birthday gifts that received only brief acknowledgments. I planned visits home that were often rescheduled at the last minute to accommodate Jackson's ever-changing plans. I called regularly despite conversations that inevitably circled back to Jackson's latest venture or personal drama. Aunt Sarah remained my strongest family ally. During one of her visits to Chicago, we spent a long weekend exploring the city and having the honest conversations that were impossible with my parents. "Your mother was always the golden child in our family," Sarah explained as we shared dessert at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city lights. "I think she is recreating that dynamic with Jackson because it is the only family model she knows. That does not make it right, but it might help you understand that this has never been about your worth." That Thanksgiving, I decided to host dinner in my apartment rather than traveling to Seattle. I spent days preparing, wanting to create the warm, inclusive holiday I had always longed for. I invited Alex several colleagues and friends who weren't traveling home. Aunt Sarah flew in from Portland. I even extended an invitation to my parents, and Jackson not expecting them to come, but wanting to make the gesture. To my surprise, they accepted. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that this might represent a turning point in our relationship. I cleaned my apartment until it sparkled, planned a menu that included everyone's favorites, and even created handmade place cards with small watercolor paintings for each guest. The dinner was a disaster. My parents arrived late, disrupting the relaxed atmosphere I had carefully cultivated. They made small talk with my friends, but repeatedly brought conversations back to Jackson's latest business idea, a subscription service for personalized workout equipment that my father was considering investing in. When I served the carefully prepared meal, my mother picked at her food and mentioned that Jackson's culinary skills were really flourishing, suggesting that next time he should be the one to cook. The final blow came during dessert, when my father raised a toast not to thank me for hosting or to celebrate the gathering, but to announce that they would be helping Jackson secure a rental property for his business venture. As my friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, I felt a familiar hollowness expand in my chest. Even in my own home at a meal I had prepared and hosted, I remained invisible. After they left, Aunt Sarah helped me clean up while my friends made excuses to depart early, sensing my need for space. As I loaded the dishwasher with shaking hands, Sarah voiced what I could not. "That was unacceptable, Chloe. You created something beautiful here, and they couldn't see past their own narrative for even one evening to appreciate it. You deserve better than this." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my window seat watching snow begin to fall over Chicago. Dr. Henderson's questions from our recent session echoed in my mind. What would it look like to prioritize your own emotional health? What boundaries might you need to set? What would happen if you stopped trying so hard to be seen by people who have shown they cannot or will not truly see you? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time I was beginning to ask the right questions. Something would need to change, but I wasn't yet ready to determine what that change would be. I continued my therapy sessions focusing on building self-worth independent of external validation while maintaining minimal contact with my family. I was in a holding pattern, waiting for clarity or courage, or perhaps both. I couldn't have known that clarity would arrive in the form of an Instagram notification that would shatter the fragile equilibrium I had been maintaining and propel me toward the most decisive action of my life. It was an ordinary Tuesday in May. I was taking a lunch break at my desk, working through a sandwich while scrolling through social media to give my mind a brief respite from the complex healthcare facility I was designing. The notification appeared innocuously. Jackson Wilson posted for the first time in a while. Curious, I tapped on it, expecting to see another promotional post about his latest business venture. Instead, I found myself staring at a photo that felt like a physical blow. There was my brother lounging on a pristine beach with a tropical drink in hand. The caption read, "Day 3 in paradise with the fam. Hash Bali. Life, family vacation." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more photos. There were my parents and Jackson at a luxury resort enjoying elegant dinners, embarking on guided excursions, and posing on a yacht. My mother's beaming smile as she stood with her arm around Jackson. My father looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. An entire family vacation that I knew nothing about. I checked my phone for missed calls or texts. Nothing. I checked my email thinking perhaps an invitation had gone to spam. Nothing. I even checked my physical mailbox when I got home, irrationally hoping to find a card or note explaining the situation. Nothing. The vacation coincided with my birthday week, a fact that added another layer of hurt to the discovery. My birthday had passed with only a brief text message from my mother. "Happy birthday, honey. Hope you're doing well." No call, no card, certainly no invitation to join them on what my father had hashtagged as the "had best family vacation ever." I called my parents immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound casual. "Hey, just saw the Bali photos, looks amazing. Give me a call when you can." My voice cracked on the last word. 2 hours later, my phone pinged with a text from my mother. "Sorry, honey meant to tell you. Service is spotty here. Having a wonderful time." That was it. No explanation for why I hadn't been included. No acknowledgement of how hurtful this exclusion might be. Just a breezy non-apology that made it clear my feelings hadn't even been considered. As the day progressed, more photos appeared on social media. Jackson ziplining through a rainforest. My parents at a cooking class, learning to make traditional Balinese cuisine. A family dinner where my father was making a toast captioned, "To the best son a father could ask for." Each new image was another needle in my heart. What made it even more painful was recalling a conversation from just 2 months earlier when I had invited my parents to visit Chicago to see a major project I had completed. They had declined, citing budget concerns and busy schedules. Yet here they were halfway across the world on what was clearly an expensive luxury vacation with Jackson. I made it through the workday on autopilot, somehow managing to participate in meetings and respond to emails while feeling as though I was observing myself from a distance. When I finally returned to my apartment that evening, the emotions I had been suppressing all day came flooding out. I collapsed on my couch and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. Around midnight, I called Aunt Sarah, not caring about the late hour or the fact that she had work the next day. She answered on the second ring, instantly alert. "Chloe, what's wrong?" When I explained about the Bali trip between choked sobs, her initial shock quickly gave way to controlled anger. "I had no idea about this trip," she said firmly. "Your mother mentioned nothing about it during our last call. This is beyond thoughtless, Chloe. This is cruel." "Am I overreacting?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. Years of having my feelings dismissed had left me unable to trust my own emotional responses. "Is it really that bad that they went on vacation without me?" "No, you are not overreacting." Sarah's voice was fierce with conviction. "This isn't just about a vacation. This is about a lifetime of being excluded and devalued. Anyone would be devastated by this." We talked until the first light of dawn began to streak the sky. Sarah offered to come to Chicago, but I assured her I would be okay. After we hung up, I sat in my window seat watching the city wake up, a strange calm settling over me. I hadn't slept, but I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. I couldn't fall asleep, so I made coffee and sat down with my journal, something Dr. Henderson had encouraged me to use for processing emotions. As I wrote, a lifetime of similar exclusions and dismissals poured onto the pages. Birthday celebrations cut short for Jackson's activities. Achievements ignored while his mediocrity was celebrated. Holidays centered around his preferences. Financial support withheld from me but lavished on him. And now the ultimate statement, a family vacation from which I had been deliberately excluded. By the time I needed to prepare for work, I had filled nearly 20 pages and reached an inescapable conclusion: nothing was going to change. My parents would never see me or value me the way they valued Jackson. No amount of achievement, accommodation, or patience on my part would alter the family dynamic. This wasn't a phase or a misunderstanding. This was who they were and who they would always be. I called in sick to work for the first time in my professional career and scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Henderson. In her calm, sunlit office, I laid out the situation and my emerging thoughts about it. "It sounds like you've reached a turning point," she observed after listening intently. "What are you considering?" "I think I need to disappear from their lives," I said, surprising myself with the clarity and conviction in my voice. "Not forever, maybe, but I need to step away completely on my terms. I need to know what it feels like to not be constantly hoping for acknowledgement that never comes." Dr. Henderson nodded slowly. "That's a significant decision. Taking space can be incredibly healing when a relationship is causing consistent pain. What might that look like for you, practically?" We spent the session exploring what a temporary disconnection from my family might entail both logistically and emotionally. I left with a tentative plan and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and pink. For the first time since discovering the Bali photos, I felt something other than pain. I felt the first stirrings of something that felt dangerously like hope, like possibility. The realization that I could choose myself, that I could walk away from relationships that diminished me, was both terrifying and exhilarating. As darkness fell over the city, I made my decision. I would not continue to participate in a family dynamic that had no place for me. I would not keep showing up for people who couldn't even be bothered to invite me on a family vacation or remember my birthday. I would not keep trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I would pack my bags and disappear from their lives just as they had repeatedly disappeared from mine. But unlike them, I would do it intentionally, deliberately, as an act of self-respect rather than thoughtless exclusion. And in that disappearance, perhaps I would finally find the room to become fully visible to myself. Once I made the decision to disconnect from my family, I approached it with the same methodical planning I would apply to a complex architectural project. I needed to be strategic, ensuring that my disappearance would be complete, but also safe and sustainable for me emotionally and practically. My first step was requesting 2 weeks of accumulated vacation time from my boss. I had rarely taken days off, and she approved my request immediately, assuming I was finally taking a well-deserved break. I was vague about my plans, mentioning only that I needed time for personal matters and would be largely unreachable. Next, I reached out to Alex, whose family owned a remote cabin on Lake Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. We had discussed it as a potential weekend getaway spot, but I had never taken her up on the offer to use it. Now, it seemed like the perfect retreat for what I needed: solitude, distance, and space to begin healing. "Of course you can use it," Alex said when I called concern evident in her voice. "But are you sure you want to be alone right now? I could come with you at least for part of the time." I appreciated her concern, but explained that solitude was exactly what I needed. "I have spent my entire life trying to be seen by people who cannot see me. I need to learn how to see myself clearly without any external influences." With the destination secured, I began practical preparations for my disappearance. I changed my phone number, setting up my old number to forward to a voicemail that simply stated I was unavailable indefinitely. I created an auto response for my personal email that directed urgent matters to an alternate address that only Alex, Aunt Sarah, and my workplace would know about. I temporarily deactivated all my social media accounts after sending private messages to close friends, explaining that I needed digital space for my mental health. Most responded with supportive messages asking no questions, but offering assistance if needed. Financial independence had been forced upon me early, which now proved advantageous. My parents had no access to my bank accounts, credit cards, or other financial information. Still, I withdrew a reasonable amount of cash to use during my retreat, reducing the digital footprint that credit card transactions would create. As the departure day approached, I packed carefully: clothes suitable for Michigan's spring weather, books I had been meaning to read, art supplies for the creative expression Dr. Henderson had encouraged. essential toiletries and medications, a journal for the daily writing practice that had become increasingly important to my emotional processing. The night before I left, I sat at my dining table writing letters I knew I would never send. One to my mother expressing the hurt of a lifetime of being overlooked. One to my father asking why his love had always seemed conditional. One to Jackson acknowledging that the family dynamic wasn't entirely his fault, but expressing my resentment nonetheless. Writing these unsent letters was cathartic, releasing emotions I had suppressed for decades. When I finished, I burned them in my kitchen sink, watching the ashes of my unspoken words disappear down the drain. I called Layla that evening, wanting to hear a friendly voice before embarking on my journey into solitude. "Are you sure this is what you need?" she asked after I explained my plan in general terms. "Cutting off contact is pretty drastic." "I have tried everything else," I explained, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I have tried being the perfect daughter. I have tried lowering my expectations. I have tried accepting scraps of attention and convincing myself it was enough. Nothing has changed and nothing will change until I change how I respond to the situation." Layla was silent for a moment before responding. "You know I support you whatever you decide. Just promise you will reach out if you need anything. Chosen family is still family, and we are here for you." My final call was to Aunt Sarah. Unlike Layla, she required no convincing. "I think this is exactly what you need," she said firmly, "and I promise I will not tell them where you are, no matter how much pressure they put on me." "Do you think they will even notice I am gone?" I asked, voicing the fear that had lingered at the edges of my consciousness. "They will notice," Sarah assured me. "Whether they will understand why is another question entirely. But that is not your responsibility, Chloe. Your only responsibility now is to heal." The morning of my departure, I did a final sweep of my apartment. I had arranged for a neighbor to water my plants and collect my mail. I had set up automatic payments for my bills. I had left detailed instructions for my work team about ongoing projects. Everything was in order for a temporary absence, though part of me wondered if I would return the same person who was leaving. I said goodbye to my apartment neighbors with a vague explanation about a personal retreat for creative rejuvenation. They wished me well, unsuspicious of the deeper purpose behind my journey. As I loaded my car in the early morning light, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Fear about the unknown ahead, grief for the family relationships I had always longed for but never experienced. But beneath these heavier feelings was something unexpected, a sense of liberation, of taking control of my narrative for perhaps the first time in my life. The drive from Chicago to Michigan's Upper Peninsula took nearly 8 hours. I watched the urban landscape give way to suburbs, then to farmland, and finally to the dense forests of northern Michigan. With each mile, I felt the weight of expectations and disappointments lifting slightly. By the time I crossed the Mackinac Bridge, connecting Michigan's lower and upper peninsulas, I was breathing more deeply than I had in months. Alex's family cabin was everything she had described and more. Nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, the rustic structure faced a small private cove on Lake Michigan. The interior was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small but functional kitchen, a bedroom with a window overlooking the water, and a screened porch perfect for early mornings and evenings. No television, no internet, just the basics needed for simple living. That first night alone in the cabin was both terrifying and exhilarating. The silence was profound after years of city living. As darkness fell, the absence of light pollution revealed a sky blazing with stars I had forgotten existed. I stood on the dock wrapped in a blanket, watching their reflection in the still water, and feeling simultaneously tiny and infinite. I slept more soundly than I had in years, lulled by the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant call of an owl. I woke with the sunrise drawn to the porch by the pink gold light filtering through the trees. Sitting with a steaming mug of coffee watching mist rise from the lake's surface, I began a morning ritual that would sustain me throughout my time at the cabin. Each day began with the sunrise observation, followed by journaling and a simple breakfast. I established a routine that balanced solitude with activity. morning hikes through the surrounding forest afternoons, spent reading or sketching evenings cooking simple meals from local ingredients. Without the constant pressure to achieve or perform for others, I began to rediscover aspects of myself that had been buried beneath years of striving for unattainable approval. I found a small bookstore in the nearest town about 20 minutes from the cabin. The owner, Elaine, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes who seemed to intuit my need for both conversation and space. She recommended books that spoke directly to my situation, without my having explicitly described it, and our brief interactions provided just enough human contact to prevent complete isolation. "You have the look of someone finding their way back to themselves," she commented one afternoon as I browsed the psychology section. "I recognize it because I had the same look 30 years ago when I left a marriage that was slowly erasing me." Her perception startled me, but her matter-of-fact delivery made it feel like an observation rather than an intrusion. Over the weeks that followed, Elaine became an unexpected guide, offering quiet wisdom through carefully chosen books and occasional cups of tea in the reading nook of her store. Days turned into weeks, and I began to notice subtle shifts in my internal landscape. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for as long as I could remember began to recede. I stopped reaching for my phone, expecting messages from people who rarely contacted me. I began to distinguish between my authentic desires and the ones I had cultivated in hopes of earning approval. Most significantly, I started to recognize that the narrative I had lived within the story of being inherently less worthy than my brother was not a truth, but a construction one that I had the power to deconstruct and replace with a more accurate understanding of my value. Dr. Henderson and I continued our therapy sessions by phone once a week, the only regular connection I maintained with my previous life. She helped me process the emotions that surfaced in the silence and solitude sometimes, with surprising intensity. "What you are doing takes immense courage," she told me during one particularly difficult session, after I had spent a day overwhelmed by anger at the years I had lost trying to earn love that should have been freely given. "You are literally rewiring neural pathways that were formed in childhood. That is painful, necessary work." As my scheduled 2 weeks away approached their end, I realized I wasn't ready to return to Chicago or to any form of contact with my family. I called my boss and negotiated an additional 2 weeks of unpaid leave, explaining that my personal situation required more time than I had anticipated. To my surprise and relief, she was understanding. "Your work has always been exceptional, Chloe," she said. "Take the time you need. The firm will be here when you are ready to return." I settled into a deeper phase of my retreat, moving beyond the initial relief of escape into more profound healing. I read books about family systems, emotional neglect, and adult children of narcissistic parents. I wrote pages upon pages, exercising painful memories and recognizing patterns that had shaped my sense of self. I practiced self-compassion exercises, Dr. Henderson had taught me, gradually softening the harsh internal critic that had internalized my parents' dismissal. Throughout this time, I had no idea how my disappearance was affecting my family. I had deliberately created a clean break with no way for them to contact me directly. Only Aunt Sarah and Alex knew my general location, and both had promised to respect my privacy unless there was a genuine emergency. I was floating in a liminal space of my own creation, disconnected from my past, yet not fully anchored to any new future. What I didn't know then was that back in Seattle, my absence was creating ripples that would eventually grow into waves powerful enough to disrupt patterns decades in the making. While I was finding myself in the solitude of the Michigan wilderness, my family was being forced to confront the consequences of years of neglect in ways none of us could have anticipated. While I was discovering peace in my Michigan sanctuary, an entirely different scenario was unfolding in Seattle. As Aunt Sarah later described it to me, my parents' return from their Bali vacation was accompanied by their usual post-trip euphoria, completely oblivious to the impact their exclusive family getaway had on me. For the first few days after their return, they didn't attempt to contact me at all. This wasn't unusual, as I was typically the one who initiated communication, another pattern I had unconsciously accepted. It wasn't until my mother decided to call with news about Jackson's latest venture that they discovered my phone number was no longer in service. She just called me in a panic, Aunt Sarah recounted weeks later. Not because she was worried about you, mind you, but because she was affronted that you had changed your number without telling her. How are we supposed to reach her? She demanded, as if your accessibility to them was your primary responsibility in life. My mother's initial irritation quickly escalated when emails bounced back with an automated response and social media messages went undelivered. My father, typically disengaged from family communications, became involved when their text messages to my work colleagues were met with professional but vague responses about my being on personal leave. According to Sarah, the turning point came when my parents decided to visit my apartment in Chicago, expecting to confront me about my childish behavior in cutting off communication. They used the spare key I had given them for emergencies years ago, only to find my apartment meticulously organized but clearly vacated. My plants were being cared for, mail was being collected, but there was no sign of recent habitation. That was when they actually started to worry, Sarah explained. Your mother called me hysterical, claiming you had disappeared without a word. I had to bite my tongue to stop from saying, kind of like how you disappeared to Bali without telling her. My parents contacted my workplace next, where they were informed that I had requested personal leave and was expected to return, but that the company could not share any additional information. When pressed, my supervisor mentioned only that I had seemed professional as always, but perhaps unusually subdued in the days before my departure. Jackson, initially dismissive of my absence, she is probably just busy with work or dating someone new, began to realize the seriousness of the situation when weeks passed with no contact. According to Sarah, this was the first time she had seen him express genuine concern about anyone other than himself. Your brother actually called me separately from your parents, she told me. He asked if I knew where you were, and when I said I couldn't tell him, he was quiet for a moment before asking, is it because of us? Because of how we treat her? It was the first self-awareness I'd ever heard from him. My parents filed a missing persons report with the Chicago police, only to be informed that an adult choosing to leave without communication was not considered missing in the legal sense, particularly when I had made arrangements with my workplace and for the maintenance of my apartment. There was no evidence of foul play or danger, just a deliberate choice to disconnect. Frustrated by the lack of police action, my parents hired a private investigator, an expensive endeavor that Sarah found darkly ironic, given their reluctance to help fund my education. The investigator tracked my last known movements, confirmed with neighbors that I had left voluntarily with packed bags, and verified that my bank accounts showed no concerning activity. The trail went cold at a gas station in northern Michigan, where I had last used my credit card before switching to cash. As weeks passed without contact, my absence began to create ripples beyond my immediate family. Friends of my parents inquired about me at social gatherings. Colleagues of my father expressed surprise that he had gone on a family vacation without me. My mother's book club, aware of her Bali trip from her enthusiastic sharing of photos, asked pointed questions about why I hadn't been included. Your mother actually had the audacity to be embarrassed, Sarah recounted, as if the problem was that people knew about their behavior, not the behavior itself. The most significant confrontation came during a dinner party at my parents' home, when a longtime family friend directly asked about my conspicuous absence from recent family events, including the Bali trip. My mother attempted to deflect, suggesting I was too busy with work to join them. The friend, aware of the situation through community gossip, challenged this explanation. I heard she didn't know about the trip at all, the friend said loudly enough for other guests to hear. That seems odd for a family vacation, doesn't it? The resulting social discomfort forced my parents to confront the public perception of their treatment of me for the first time. They had always maintained a narrative of being devoted, supportive parents to both their children. My absence and the circumstances surrounding it were beginning to crack that carefully constructed facade. Aunt Sarah, tired of fielding daily calls from my increasingly desperate parents, finally confronted my mother during a particularly demanding phone call. Did it ever occur to you that Chloe left because of how you treat her? Sarah asked bluntly. That maybe being excluded from a family vacation while you all posted about what a wonderful time you were having was the final straw, after a lifetime of being treated as less important than Jackson. Her words were met with shocked silence, followed by my mother's tearful denial. "We love Chloe. How could she think otherwise? We have always supported her." "Have you," Sarah pushed back, "have you supported her the way you support Jackson? Have you celebrated her achievements the way you celebrate his? Have you ever even once put her needs above his?" The conversation ended with my mother hanging up, but Sarah's questions lingered. In the days that followed, my father called Sarah something he rarely did, and asked more calmly about what she had meant. "That was the first real conversation I had ever had with your father about family dynamics," Sarah told me. "He seemed genuinely confused, as if he had never considered that there might be a problem with how they treated you. It was like he had been operating on autopilot for decades, without ever examining the patterns they had created." Jackson's reaction to Sarah's confrontation with my parents surprised everyone. Rather than defensively siding with my parents, as he had done throughout childhood, he began asking uncomfortable questions of his own. Why hadn't Chloe been invited to Bali? Why had they always attended his events, but missed so many of hers? Why had they fully funded his education and multiple failed business ventures while requiring me to work through college? "Your brother is not blameless in all this," Sarah acknowledged. "But he seems to be the first one in your immediate family to genuinely reflect on the patterns and his role in them." My mother, faced with these questions from multiple directions, retreated into defensiveness and tearful declarations of good intentions. My father, however, began a more introspective process. He found my childhood journals in the attic while looking for clues to where I might have gone. Reading my adolescent accounts of feeling invisible and unimportant in the family shook him deeply. "Your father called me after finding those journals," Sarah said. "He was more emotional than I had ever heard him. He kept saying, 'I didn't know. I just didn't know.' I told him that was the problem exactly. Not that he had intentionally hurt you, but that he had never paid enough attention to even notice the hurt." As the weeks of my absence stretched on, my family's initial anger at my dramatic disappearance gave way to a more complex reckoning with the family dynamics that had driven me away. For perhaps the first time, I was at the center of the family's attention, not through achievement or crisis, but through absence that demanded acknowledgement. What I couldn't have known as I healed in my lakeside sanctuary was that my disappearance was catalyzing changes I had spent years trying and failing to create through presence achievement and endless accommodation. Sometimes, as I was learning, the most powerful statement is made not through words, but through silence, not through presence, but through absence. 6 weeks after my departure from Chicago, I woke to the sound of gentle rain pattering on the cabin roof. The Michigan spring was in full bloom, the forest around the cabin lush with new growth. I had extended my leave from work twice, using accumulated vacation time and unpaid leave to give myself the space I needed. My boss had been surprisingly understanding, perhaps recognizing that this break would ultimately benefit both me and the firm. During my time at this cabin, I had established a rhythm that nourished rather than depleted me. Mornings spent in quiet contemplation by the lake. Days filled with hiking, reading, and creative projects I had neglected for years. Evenings of simple cooking and stargazing. I had begun sketching designs again, not for clients, but for the pure joy of creation, something I hadn't done since before college. My weekly phone sessions with Dr. Henderson had helped me process the complex emotions that surfaced in solitude. Grief for the family relationships I had longed for but never experienced. Anger at years of dismissal and exclusion. Fear about what awaited me when I eventually reconnected with the world. But alongside these difficult emotions had grown something new, a quiet confidence in my own worth, independent of external validation. That rainy morning, as I sat on the screened porch with a cup of tea watching droplets gather on pine needles, I realized I was ready to return to my life. Not as the person who had left Chicago desperately seeking approval from people unable to give it, but as someone who had begun to find solid ground within herself. I called Alex first, knowing she had been worried despite respecting my need for space. "I'm coming back," I told her, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Not to the same life, but to a new version of it, one where I choose what matters." Next, I called my workplace to confirm my return date. My supervisor expressed genuine pleasure at the news, mentioning that my design team had kept my current projects moving forward, but were eager for my leadership again. It was a small validation of my professional worth that once would have seemed desperately important, but now felt simply pleasant, one facet of a multidimensional life. The most difficult call was to Aunt Sarah. Throughout my absence, she had been my only tenuous connection to my family, fielding their increasingly desperate attempts to locate me while honoring her promise not to reveal my whereabouts. "They've been searching for you," she told me after expressing relief at my decision to return. "Not just physically, but searching for understanding of why you left. It hasn't been a pretty process, but I think it might have been a necessary one." She described the family's journey during my absence, my parents' initial anger giving way to confusion, then to the first glimmers of genuine self-examination. Jackson's surprising role in questioning family patterns, the social fallout as friends and colleagues became aware of the dynamics that had driven me away. "I can't promise they've transformed completely," Sarah cautioned. "6 weeks can't undo decades of patterns. But there's been movement, Chloe, real movement." I considered this information carefully. "I'm not coming back for them," I clarified. "I'm coming back for me because I'm ready to build a life on my terms. If they want to be part of that life, they'll need to respect the boundaries I set." My return to Chicago was as methodical as my departure had been. I packed the few belongings I had brought to Michigan, left the cabin immaculate with a thank you note and gift basket for Alex's family, and began the long drive south. The journey felt symbolic each mile, bringing me closer to re-engagement with the world, but with a new internal compass to guide my decisions. My apartment welcomed me with the familiar comfort of my own space. My neighbor Maria had kept my plants thriving, and the afternoon light still created the same patterns on my living room floor. Yet everything felt different because I was different. I spent that first evening reacquainting myself with urban sounds and rhythms, both grateful for the amenities of city life and missing the profound quiet of the forest. The following day, I changed my phone number again, this time, providing it selectively to friends, colleagues, and Aunt Sarah. I reactivated my social media accounts, but with stricter privacy settings and more mindful usage patterns. I met with my boss to discuss my return to work, negotiating a gradual re-entry that would allow me to maintain some of the balance I had discovered during my retreat. Only after I had reestablished these foundations did I send a simple email to my parents. "I am safe. I am back in Chicago. I needed time away to process the patterns in our family that have been hurtful to me. I am open to conversation when you are ready to truly hear me. Please respect that this will need to happen on my terms and in my time." The response was almost immediate, a flurry of emotional messages expressing relief, confusion, hurt, and demands for explanation. I read them calmly, but didn't respond immediately, giving myself time to consult with Dr. Henderson about the healthiest way to proceed. "Remember that you control the pace and boundaries of this reconnection," she advised during our first in-person session since my return. "Their urgency doesn't override your need for a thoughtful, measured approach." A week after my return to Chicago, I agreed to a video call with my parents. I set clear parameters in advance. The call would last no more than an hour. If voices were raised or boundaries crossed, I would end it immediately. This was a first step in what would need to be a longer process if we were to rebuild a relationship. The faces that appeared on my screen looked older, more vulnerable than I remembered. My mother's hair seemed grayer, my father's expression more uncertain. For the first time in my memory, they weren't projecting the confident, successful image they had always maintained. "Chloe," my mother began, her voice breaking, "we were so worried. How could you just disappear like that without a word?" It was so characteristic of her to center her experience rather than acknowledge mine that I almost smiled. Some patterns were deeply ingrained indeed. "I left because I needed to," I replied calmly. For the first time in my life, I chose to prioritize my own emotional health over maintaining a family dynamic that has consistently hurt me. My father leaned forward. "Sarah mentioned the Bali trip. Was that really why you left?" "It wasn't intentional, Chloe. We just assumed you would be too busy with work to join us." "The trip wasn't the reason I left," I explained. It was simply the final evidence of a lifelong pattern. You have consistently prioritized Jackson's needs, wants, and feelings over mine. You have celebrated his modest achievements while taking my significant ones for granted. You have provided him with financial and emotional support that you withheld from me. The trip was just the clearest illustration that in your minds, a family vacation doesn't include me. My mother began to protest, but my father placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "I found your childhood journals," he said quietly. "I had no idea you felt so overlooked. Why didn't you ever say anything?" I did. I answered, memories flooding back. Many times in many ways. I asked why Jackson's soccer games were more important than my academic competitions. I asked why his C grades were celebrated while my A's were expected. I asked why you funded his college fully, but made me work through mine. You always had justifications that made it seem reasonable in the moment, but the pattern was clear to everyone except you. The conversation continued with difficult truths laid bare on both sides. My parents struggled between defensiveness and genuine remorse. I maintained my boundaries while acknowledging that they likely hadn't intended the harm their actions had caused. By the end of the hour, we had reached no neat resolution, but had established a foundation for continued conversation. "We want to do better, Chloe," my father said as our time drew to a close. "We don't want to lose you from our lives." "I'm willing to work on building a healthier relationship," I responded carefully. "But it will require real change, not just temporary adjustments, until things go back to normal, because the normal we had wasn't healthy for any of us." In the weeks that followed, we established a tentative new pattern: weekly video calls with clear time limits, individual therapy for my parents paralleling my ongoing work with Dr. Henderson, plans for a family therapy session once all of us had done sufficient individual work to make it productive. Jackson reached out separately, a text message that surprised me with its self-awareness. "I never realized how unfair things were for you. I didn't create the dynamic, but I benefited from it and never questioned it. I'm sorry, Chloe. I'd like to know my sister as a person, not as a shadow in the family story." We began our own careful reconnection separate from our parents. Coffee over video chat, where we talked about our lives as adults rather than remaining trapped in childhood roles. It was awkward, halting, but contained possibilities I had never imagined. 3 months after my return to Chicago, my parents asked to visit. With Dr. Henderson's support, I agreed, but with clear boundaries, they would stay in a hotel, not my apartment. We would have structured activities and time limits for interactions. And if old patterns emerged, I would not hesitate to cut the visit short. Their arrival was tentative, so different from the confident entitlement they had always projected. We toured the architectural firm where I worked, my father expressing genuine interest in my current projects. We visited my favorite neighborhood spots, my mother asking questions about my life in Chicago, with none of the dismissive comparison to Seattle that had characterized previous visits. The most powerful moment came during dinner at a quiet restaurant I had selected for its neutral territory. My father, after a thoughtful silence, said, "I've been thinking about all the events of yours we missed, all the achievements we didn't properly celebrate. I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I see now what we did, and I am deeply sorry for the pain it caused you." My mother, less comfortable with direct acknowledgement, added, "We thought we were just parenting the way parents do. We didn't see the pattern until you made us see it by leaving." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Old habits occasionally surfaced, requiring gentle but firm correction. My mother still sometimes spoke more enthusiastically about Jackson's latest venture than my recent professional success. My father still occasionally lapsed into problem-solving rather than listening. But there was effort, genuine effort, to create new patterns. As for me, I continued building a life centered on my own values, rather than the desperate search for approval that had driven me for so long. I deepened friendships with people who saw and appreciated me. I explored interests beyond work that I had neglected in my drive to achieve. I even began dating again, more confident in my ability to recognize healthy versus unhealthy dynamics. My relationship with my family remains a work in progress. Some days are easier than others. Some old hurts are triggered unexpectedly. But we are engaged in a process of rebuilding that would have been impossible without the dramatic break that forced everyone to confront reality. This Thanksgiving will be hosted at Aunt Sarah's home neutral territory for our still healing family. My parents and Jackson will be there. So will Alex and 2 other close friends I've invited, ensuring I have my chosen family alongside my biological one. It won't be perfect, but it will be authentic in a way our previous family gatherings never were. What I've learned through this journey is that sometimes those who take you for granted need to lose you to understand your value. Sometimes healing requires walking away, creating enough distance to see patterns clearly, and develop the strength to demand better. And sometimes the family you need most is the one you build for yourself, one relationship at a time. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find yourself? What boundaries have you set to protect your emotional health? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes disappearing is the most powerful way to finally be seen. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is not determined by those who cannot see it clearly.